right. So we have Lily with us. Thank you so much for joining us, Lily, as we venture down the path of better understanding some of the struggles that you might have experienced, some of the challenges that you might have had, either as a child or throughout your life, and also celebrating and maybe bringing to life some of the victories and things that you've done to overcome those challenges. So, Lily, I wanted to welcome you to the Streaking with Friends podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right in. So as I've already mentioned, right, the what I feel like the fruit of what we're doing here is giving folks an opportunity to share your story and to do a bit of a self-examination and get more comfortable with your story, and then also let us know, kind of what maybe some of the most significant things that might have occurred in your life that you feel like have shaped your character, that have allowed for you to build the resolve that you have, and led you to accomplish some of the things that you have done. So let's start with maybe, what do you feel like is one of the more significant things that might have happened early on in your life? Lily, you want to tell us a little bit about that?
So when I was born, as soon as I was born, I was put straight into the foster care system in Louisiana. Um, my mother was drunk when she went into delivery, so that was an immediate sign that they needed to take me out of her care. 3 days later, I was put into a foster home, and the people that I was put into a foster home with were became my adoptive parents, and I never had to change a home. I never went through the experience of going into different foster homes like other people have. And the struggles that my adoptive mom explained to me was, um, when I was born, I had failure to thrive, which meant I basically didn't want to live as a baby.
Mm,
My body wasn't comprehending the withdrawals from the alcohol that I had had when I was in the womb,
sure.
and so that was like the first struggle, was getting me to eat because I didn't want to eat. And as a baby, I mean, you don't know what babies want, but like as one where you're like, they don't
Right.
want to eat everything I feed them, they throw it back up. My mom was like, it was very stressful, especially because they didn't have any other kids. Like, I was the first one, and it was kind of like quick moving. My mom, they had just gotten into the foster care system, and like a few weeks later, got a call. We have this little girl in the hospital, and we need somebody to take her right now. So she had to like go to Walmart,
Wow.
buy all this stuff. Like, she had no baby stuff, didn't have like a baby shower or anything. Like, like just had to go. I mean, this was in 1997, so I mean, like, it's not like it is now where you can order stuff on Amazon and it'll be at your house, a few days. But so like she had to go and get all this stuff
But
and get me ready.
the whole experience was on fast forward, huh? It was almost
Oh
like she
yeah.
just was thrown into it, huh?
Oh yeah. And so she and my dad, they ended up a year later adopting me, but through that time, they found out that my biological mom was pregnant again and she had my brother, and 16 months later, and they said she had a little boy, do you want the little boy? And they were like, yeah. So me and my brother were put in the same home, which it's not common for siblings to be put in the same home
Right.
because most foster parents don't want the same kind of like the same issue, or they've already had enough and they're like, okay, so that
Sure.
was one thing. But me and my brother both kind of had the same kind of issues. We were both born with holes in our hearts. My brother had three and I had two. They mine closed. I believe my brother still has one. But like, so we had that
Mm,
struggle. We had a lot of medical stuff. But the doctors were like, they're gonna be like, there's gonna be something wrong with them. They're not gonna be, they're not gonna have a full life. And it's kind of funny because my
sure.
mom was like, "Yeah, okay, watch me." Um, my mom had also before that been diagnosed with cancer, ovarian cancer. And they told her,
Oh
"You
my
have these
goodness.
many months to live," and she said, "Uh, no." She said, "I think God's gonna determine that." And 64 years later, she's still here. So, yeah, it's so like my mom kind of gave me that motivation too, but she like did everything that she could to like keep me going. And she and my dad really like, I mean, they pushed me, and that's kind of like where I got like everything that I use today. I got from my parents. Going forward into
Lily, that
school,
is incredible. What an inspiration mom is, huh?
yeah, yeah, she was great. So like going forward into school, like my mom like always pushed me, even though like sometimes, I mean, as a kid in like fourth grade, you know, you don't want to. You're like, this is silly. Why am I having to add, you know, seven different numbers? But she like pushed me to like get the best grades and do everything. And in fourth grade, I was diagnosed with tunnel vision, which is like seeing through a pinhole. I had no peripheral vision. My vision was 20/20. So going to the eye doctor, they were like, she can see. I mean, there's nothing wrong with her. So it took a specialist in Baton Rouge to diagnose me with tunnel vision, which can be corrected through years of therapy, which I went through.
Hmm.
But the doctor had told me that she was like, if y'all wouldn't have caught this, she would have probably been blind and she wouldn't have been able to drive. Just because, I mean, your
Oh,
peripheral vision
wow.
when you're driving, when you're going through it, and like I was going through therapy and I was getting my peripheral vision strengthened. We were actually on our way home from one of the visits, and my mom was like, we were driving and I could see the power lines out of the side, and I was like, oh my gosh, what is that? And my mom's like, that's the power lines. I had never seen that before because I couldn't see my peripheral. So it was like an amazing thing
No
that like,
kidding.
yeah. So and it's like people don't understand that. Like the teachers that I had, she didn't like they really thought like she just doesn't want to learn. She just doesn't want to be in class and she's just trying to
Right,
make up excuses, which I understand, you know, teachers can't always believe, you know, everything. And they, I mean, they really couldn't do anything for me. They moved me to the front of the class. I was like maybe 3 feet away from the board, and I still couldn't see.
right.
I had distance problems, which my eyes later in life we found out my eyes are not shaped in this way that they're supposed to be. So I have
Hmm.
to wear contacts at night that put them in the shape so that I can see distance, so I can see far away. But therapy really helped me
It's
too.
funny.
Go ahead.
So what was the therapy like? What would you actually do? So when you say, right, it can be healed with therapy or it can be improved with therapy, what was that therapy like?
So the therapy was, it was different exercises that you did. There were times where they had like a stick with a ball at the end. And you had to follow it with your eyes. Um and my eyes
Mhm.
would jump a lot. So like I could follow it, but then my eye would jump that way. And so it was just to train my eye to just follow the ball at the end. A lot of it was like um I didn't have any like coordination. So like going with a metronome and stepping up on a step, 1 foot at a time, and then stepping back down, but with the metronome. So you had to do it like
Mm,
in sync with the metronome. Reading a
right.
chart that had just different letters on it. You had to read the chart and they would put me further back so it would strengthen my vision. I mean, they did all kinds of stuff and it was like 2 years of therapy. Um, and really that stuck with me for, I mean, until I started grad school when I became an ABA therapist, which is working with autistic kids. And we that was actually my grad school like paper, was on why I wanted to do this. um and it was because the therapist that I had, she was great. I mean, there were some days I'd come in, I mean, I was in fourth grade, but I would come in and I would be in a bad mood. I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to do
Hmm.
anything. I had an attitude with her, like, and she'd just be like, "Look, you have to do this. We both have to do this. Let's just get it done, and you can go home."
Right.
After that, I'd go home and I'd still have to do like 2 hours of homework. So it wasn't much better, but she really like pushed me, and I've like become good friends with that therapist. We actually reconnected when I got older. um and I told her, you know, how she strengthened me in being the person I am today,
Hmm.
because she pushed me too and believed in me when it felt like the world was against me at one point.
Sure.
So yeah. Um, but then it just got harder after
Lily, it's
that because
interesting that you mentioned it's interesting that you mentioned the eyesight issue because just today, so I have two daughters, an 11-year-old and a 6-year-old, and just today my 11-year-old had an eye doctor appointment, and I don't know if there's terminology or a formal diagnosis for what she has, but she had been getting headaches in school, and despite having good vision, what we were told today is that when she has to focus at things close up, like reading or doing math or anything including closer things, and she has to focus for over 15 minutes, her eyes have trouble with concentrating for that extended period of time, and they're working kind of on overdrive, and she was getting the headaches as a result of that. And so from what we understand, the appointment that we had today, she's going to be able to get a prescription that's going to help her with that, and she's only going to have to wear it in class and when she's doing isolated reading or things that require focus. But we were so grateful to learn that that was a thing, because we were beginning to be concerned about why she was getting so many headaches and why she was struggling with attention and all this other stuff, and to learn that it was an eyesight issue even though she has 20/20 vision.
mhm. Yeah, and a lot of the times like people that's like a really a not and like a really uncommon thing um that people don't know. My mom actually found out from a friend of mine that was in my class. Her mom had taken she and her brother to the same eye doctor, and she was like,
Hmm.
go try it out. I mean, she's the only specialist in the state. Um, she didn't accept insurance, so she was like, but if she can find out what's wrong, then or you can narrow it down. So yeah, and I still struggle with that stuff today. I still have to have accommodations with things um, in school. Since I did grad school online, um, it was really hard on my eyes
Sure.
because I'm staring at a computer screen really all day long. At work, my work is on the computer, and then I'd come home and go to class from 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock. So I mean, I was on the computer. I'd go to a doctor's appointment every year, and she's like, and how long are you on the computer? I'm like, probably about like 14 hours a day. And she's like, oh my gosh. I'm like, yeah, I know, for a
Wow.
girl who has really bad eyesight, my life is spent staring at a computer screen. But yeah,
Sure.
and this year I got married in April in 2020, and it's kind of a thing that I started thinking
Congratulations.
about. Thank you. I started thinking about it, and I was like, oh my gosh. Like, because I don't know much of my family's history since I was adopted. I met my biological parents, but they didn't really know a lot of stuff that was wrong with them just because they had done so many things when they were young. It could have been from the drugs and the alcohol, or it could have been hereditary. They don't know if it was something that was from birth or
Sure.
from that. But I looked it up, and I was like, because I asked my mom, I was like, I wonder if tunnel vision is like, can I pass it on to my kids? Like, am I basically going to be like giving my kids the same problems that I have? Um, and I looked it up, and it is. But my mom was like, don't panic. She was like, because that might have been a side effect from the alcohol that you had.
Sure.
So it's kind of like a I was like, "Oh my god, like, am I gonna have to go through like, are my kids gonna have to go through this? Like, I don't want them to have to go through this because I had to go through this, but I'm glad I had to go through this because if my kids do have to go through this, I can support them, in a
You're
better way than."
prepared. You're prepared
Yeah,
with all the steps. That's right.
yeah,
And you're
um,
obviously an example. You're obviously an example of what it looks like to overcome those hurdles and still thrive in spite of it. So Lily, something I want to do is, you mentioned grad school, and you mentioned, right. I would imagine you have an undergrad to go to grad school. You have an undergrad. So talk to us a little bit about, what does today look like? So what does it look like now? What type of work are you doing? What does your lifestyle look like today, despite the challenges early on in life?
so, I I did at one point work with kids who were diagnosed with autism directly in
Hmm.
what's called an ABA clinic. It's applied behavior analysis. And they do therapy
Hmm.
with kids with autism and work with their behaviors um, in different ways and kind of help them kind of cope with their behaviors, but also teach the parents like it kind of follows I don't know if you've heard like gentle parenting, but it's kind of
I'm not
like
familiar with
that.
the term. You know.
It's kind of
Okay, help me with it. What's if you know the definition, or what's your version of what is gentle parenting?
so it's kind of like, so ABA is like I was raised and you did something and you got a butt whipping. Like that's just the era that I was raised in. That's just how I was raised, and like there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, as long as you don't take it too far, I don't think there's any problem with that. But
Sure.
ABA kind of uses a different perspective, as in like you use like what we call positive reinforcement, and you like instead of saying don't run in the hallway, you would say like how you're using your walking feet. So
Right.
instead of saying don't do this, you flip it around and you find the positive in it.
You
So
frame
instead
it
of
in a
pointing,
positive. Right.
yeah, because in the studies that I've read, kids that are diagnosed with autism, most of the time, I mean, really any kid, you tell them don't do something, all they hear is like if you say don't run, they're gonna run because all they hear is run. They
Hmm.
don't hear don't
Right.
do. So that's kind of what ABA is, but like, we work with their behaviors and we help them replace behaviors with behaviors that would help them in society. And I've worked with kids from ages 18 months to 16 years old. And it's really cool to see kids that started, how they progress. And you're kind of like that positive, like you're kind of like that motivator for them and the parents,
Sure.
because you have parents coming in and they're very upset. Their child just gotten diagnosed with autism, and they're just they're just like I don't know what to do. So you kind of, it's kind of like you're working with the family, but you're also working with the child. And you're motivating them to, you can do this. It's hard for you right now, but and that's always what I told the parents that I worked with. It looks hard right now, but later it's gonna be, great. I've seen clients that didn't talk, and the doctor said they're never gonna talk, and they started singing their ABCs and started saying yay and mommy and daddy and things that these parents thought they'd never hear. And it's
Right.
it's
Oh,
not to
I
say
bet
that,
that's a wonderful day when a parent.
and
I
it
bet that's
is
a
because
wonderful day when a parent hears their child's voice and they had never thought that they would speak. You know.
yeah, and it's so heartwarming to see it, because like the look on their face when they see it, they're just like they're improving so much. Like it's when the light bulb flicks on in the parent's head, really, like, oh my god, this is working, like this is great. But I kind of got that from my eye therapy because that's how my therapist was. And even though it's not the same, all therapists are good, whether you're an occupational therapist, a speech therapist, physical therapist, you're helping people do stuff that they don't think that they can do. So when
Sure.
I got into ABA, I was finishing my undergrad and I was like, I'm finished. I'm done. I'm not going back to school. I'm done with school. This is it. Uh I got this job and I was like, "Oh my god, I love this." And they were like, "Yeah, there's a master's program that you can do and you can become BCBA, which is the supervisor of you have your own caseload and you work with the parents and the kids, but you kind of help decide what to work on with them, and you tweak the different programs that they run." So I did that, and the motivation from that came from when I was probably about 12 or 13. I had a teacher, like I said, my mom, motivated me to do the best, make the best grades. Um, and at the school that I went to at the time, they did midterms and finals, kind of like getting us ready
Hmm.
for high school, because it was close to that time. So they were kind of trying to step us into that. And I had made A's on my midterms. I hadn't done the best in school. I kind of made A's and B's, more B's than A's. Um, but
Hmm.
they teacher saw that I made A's and she was like, "You had to have cheated." And I was like, "No, I didn't cheat." Like, your first thought shouldn't have been the student cheated. You should have been like, "Wow, what did
Right.
you do to prepare yourself for that?" Like, "Wow, I'm so proud you
Sure.
made like 4 A's on your test." And I was like, "No, I didn't." And she took it further as to pull me out of PE in front of the whole class, and to pull me into the principal's office. Um, they called my mom at work. Um, my mom does taxes, so it was in the middle of tax season. She was very busy, so for them to call her at work, and bother her with that,
That
um,
was a big deal. Yeah.
yeah,
Disturbing
and
mom at home or
and
at
then
work.
and then I wasn't even like a problem student. So like my mom was really shocked when the school called, and the teacher just basically told her at the end of it, she was like, "She's a C average student. That's all she'll ever make." And it was kind of like another thing where my mom was
Wow.
like, "Oh yeah, watch her." So my mom pulled me out.
Right.
She pulled me and my brother both out of that school, and she put us into another school. And I flourished. I mean, I made A's and B's. The teachers that I had were great. Um, some of them I still communicate with. One of them pushed me to do social studies, where I told my story about my adoption, and I also told my story about my grandparents' life during World War II.
Yeah.
And my mom really pushed me, but also my teachers really pushed me to like do it because I really didn't. I really was like, no, I'm not gonna do that, but I did it. Um, so then carrying on to college, that really just pushed me to like, I'm gonna make the best grades. Undergrad was a little difficult, just because I was getting used to it. There were a little bit more teachers. It wasn't as focused, just because you have to start with like the basic stuff. But going into grad school, I started off with a 4.0, and I carried a 4.0 until like my
Wow.
third semester. And I mean, I graduated with a 3. And when I graduated, my mom was like, "I wish that teacher could see you today." And like that always stuck in the
Right.
back of my head. When I wanted to quit and give up, I was like, "I'm not," because I want to prove her wrong. It was kind of like I want to prove her wrong because I can do this. So it was always like I kind of like put it in the back of my mind, like I can do this because I'm not a C average student and I can do this. Yeah, so that's really like I always tell like people that I've worked with, that like some teachers can put students down, but they don't realize it that they're doing that.
Right.
And I actually wanted to be in education, up until the end of my undergrad, and then I switched to psychology just because I figured, that's not the field I wanted to be in. I was more interested in psychology, and then COVID hit, so really couldn't do much.
Sure.
But yeah,
Well, Lily,
that
one
was.
thing that stands out to me about that is, again, you were dealt, not the best hand, right? And there's a lot of things that I'm paying attention to that were working against you, but there's also a lot of things that were working in your favor. Kudos to mom, right?
Mhm.
Your mom is, I would imagine, an incredible person that I would love to meet someday, and that most people probably benefit from knowing her or her being a part of their life. And I'm sure you and your brother, I'm not saying she was always easy on you, because like you said, I'm sure there were strict punishments when things, when you acted out and got out of line. But at the end of the day, mom was always there to support you, to encourage you, and to continue to nudge you in a positive direction, replacing some of those bad or unhealthy habits with the good things and the persistence and the healthy practices, despite your early on challenges. Also too, I think about, right, how great is the I know it probably doesn't get too much positive press, but how great is it that the foster care system worked, right? That it
Yeah.
worked in a way that the life that you're currently living would not have been possible were it not for you being respectfully and responsibly handled by the foster system and being placed with your mom and dad, and then eventually them having the opportunity to adopt you, and then your brother being a part of that as well. That's amazing.
And that was my history project for one of my things was the foster system doesn't get a lot of good press. It really doesn't. You hear a lot about, abuse in the homes and different stuff like that. Especially today. That's really all you hear. And every
Sure.
time I see that, whether it's on Facebook or TikTok, or I'm always like, okay, but there are good stories. Like the foster system itself is not bad. There's just some bad people, and they're not necessarily bad people. They just did not have the right intentions. I know
Sure.
a lot of people go in it on the argument and say, well, they just want the money. And really,
Right.
the state will reimburse you. Um so they're not getting a a profit off of the foster care system itself. But yeah, and I always try to push my story out there and say, like, there are positive stories. You just have to look deeper for them more than the negative. But that's with everything. There's more negative than positive sometimes. You just have to push the positive more than
Well,
you
for
do the
whatever
negative.
reason, the way our brains wired, yeah, I guess it's human nature that negative press, occupies more space in our attention. It has a tendency to be more viral, if you will, in this content age. If you put out something that's a dig on somebody or throwing shade on somebody or whatever kind of language you want to use, any type of negative press is going to be way more viral than something that would be positive in the other direction, which is it's frustrating. But then it's also, like you said, it's heartwarming for you to learn of and know that there are stories like yours that are out there that is a positive experience with the system.
Yeah. um But yeah, my parents were, I mean, my dad said it for my birthday this year. And that's kind of where, like, I've been listening to you on TikTok and stuff. And I'd kind of been going like back and forth, like, am I going to be boasting about this if I post stuff about it? Um am I going to be like, "Oh, well, she's just bragging about, the life, she's just bragging about her positive stuff." But my dad was like, "You had a tough hand handed to you from day 1." And he was like, "And
Hmm.
you s- and he told me this. He was like, "You still cease to amaze me." He's like, "Every day you're doing something different." And even my
Mm.
husband said it. He was like, "Yo, he was like, I never expect my wife to, like, blow my mind, but she always blows my mind, whether it's playing a video game, or doing something on TikTok, or doing something at work." He was like, "She puts her whole self into it." And I do. In everything I do, at my job, I put my whole heart into it. And that came from my parents. Both my parents, taught me, when you do something, you do it right, and you do it good. And they're like, that way people don't have anything negative to say about you. And if they do, it's really good things, because they're just trying to find something negative. So yeah, I
Sure.
mean, my dad was really the advocate for that. He was like, he made a post on Facebook, and he was like, she was dealt a hard hand, and 26 years later, she's still here and she's thriving more than ever. But I mean, to people that my thing is to people that don't think they can do it, you can do it. You just have to have that push and that motivation. Think about something that told you couldn't, and then say, no, I can. And that's what I
Right.
do. I always have motivational quotes everywhere, because I'm currently sitting for my board exam for the BCBA. And it's a very hard test. And I'm not really a great test taker when it comes to big exams like that. But I always just think in
Right.
the back of my head, I can do this. I've gotten this far. and I can do this. But that's my thing is motivation is key. You just have to find where it's at.
So I'll agree with you to an extent on that, Lily, and thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing those thoughts. I'll agree with you that motivation is important. That right, you need to find whatever the formula is that you respond to. Right. So earlier
Mhm.
you mentioned that one of your motivations was to prove that teacher wrong, right? That's a great motivation. And some people respond well to that type of interaction or that type of experience with someone. And so they want to kind of prove the haters wrong, which is great. Because if you identify for yourself that that's motivating for you, then great. Then lean into that and use that as your motivation. But coupled with that, is the positive way that your mom supported you and encouraged you, and probably the way that your therapist supported you and encouraged you with positive, uplifting language that was healthy, right? You need both. Um,
Yeah.
Now, for myself, what I give a lot of attention to, Lily, is the idea of creating daily, consistent habits that become disciplined daily behaviors as opposed to waiting for the day when motivation is going to show up or waiting
Mhm.
for the exterior thing that another person is going to come to, identify a strength that you have that you might not see, or identify a talent that you have that you might not see. A real big thing that I encourage people to pay attention to is, what are the steps that you need to take to transfer any of that temporary or short term motivation and transmit it or transfer it, whatever language you want to use, into some type of discipline, some type of embedded daily practice, to where you don't rely on motivation because it can't be counted on. But what can you take ownership of, right? And I feel like we can take ownership of those habits that we build.
Yeah. Um so one habit that I built through school was when I first started school, cuz through high school we really didn't have homework. Um you kind of did
Hmm.
your work in class, you were assigned work, but you weren't assigned homework. So when I started college, it was to get back into, okay, you have to sit down, you have to write a paper, you have to do research for a paper, you have to take this test at a certain time, or you have to take this test within this week. And it was to, um, okay, I have to set out a day to just do homework. So I would set up Sundays, Sunday afternoons. I would sit in my room and do homework, um, and that was my
Hmm.
day. Nothing was on the planner, nothing was on the schedule. If anybody wanted to do something with me, I'm like, I have to get my homework done first. If I get
Right.
done with it early enough, I'll see you. If I don't, I'll see you later. But it was to build that habit into, okay, every Sunday I'm going to do homework. And that was kind of like, I didn't like tell my mom that or anything, like, oh, every Sunday make sure I'm doing homework. It kind of just became a thing where she was like, it's Sunday afternoon, she's in her room doing homework. I would close my door and there was just silence. So that was one thing. I also would
Lily,
go
I
to the
love that.
pool.
I want to learn. Talk to me about what you think gave you that idea. Like, how did you figure that out? Because I can tell you that for myself, I grew up with an obnoxious amount of energy, and I was constantly distracted and bouncing off the walls, and it would be virtually impossible for me to have the self control to stick to a disciplined habit like that. So where do you think you found that motivation, and where did you get that idea, and what was it that allowed you to keep that?
So, I kind of went through a few different things. So I just tried different things, like, because I would get very distracted. My phone. Oh, find myself scrolling on Facebook. Um, or I was listening to music and then I'd start looking for a new playlist. So I went through kind of this thing of, okay, what's gonna work best for me. So I would add things and take things away. Um, if they weren't working. One thing that I found was what's called the Pomodoro method. And it's where you work
Hmm.
for you
What's it called?
the Pomodoro method. It's where you work for 25 to 30 minutes, and then you take a 5 to 10 minute break after that 30 minutes is over. So you're not working for 2 hours straight, you're taking tiny breaks in between. So I would get up, walk outside, let the dog go outside, um, go use the bathroom, get a snack, get some water, refill my drink, so that when I sat back down at my desk, I had no reason to get back up. I would text back
Hmm.
whoever I needed to text back, email any professors that I needed to email if I had any questions, so that I wouldn't email them during my working time, so that I wouldn't be tempted to get onto Google and type in something else that I wasn't supposed to be working on. And
Sure.
especially with writing papers. When I first started undergrad, I hated writing papers. I did not like it. But after doing it for so long, it's just became like second nature. Like you could tell me to go write a paper on a topic and I'm just like, okay, where do I need to get the research for it?
Right.
You know, so now it's like, write a paper? That's easy. Um, there was actually a girl that I worked with and she was like, oh, I have to write a paper. I was like, girl, I used to hate writing papers. I was like, that's easy. To me, I find taking tests harder than writing a paper. And that's what I had trouble with
Sure.
was studying for a test versus writing a paper. Um, it was getting all the information that I needed and then sitting down and just sitting there and reading. And so what I
Hmm.
found worked for me with that was making note cards. And as I was making those note cards, I was reading out loud as I was writing. And then after I wrote the note card, I would read it out loud again. That way I would memorize it better. So it was kind of like repetition is really, key with that is you do it enough times and it's going to become second nature.
Sure.
So in grad school, I had to take what they call the comprehensive exam. So it was beginning to end, from beginning of grad school to the end, what you learned in one big test. And I read
Wow.
my study guide. I mean, every day I just read it out loud. And for a while I was like trying to skip over, and that's what I did the first time was I skipped over a lot because I was like, oh, I know that. I don't need to read it.
Right.
Second time around, I was like, "No, I need to read this." I read it word for word, and it just became, like, ingrained in my brain, like, I would be reading it, but before I was even reading the words, I was already saying it. So, it was kind of finding the different methods that worked, and just trial and error.
Sure.
If I found myself scrolling on Facebook or, okay, well, I need to put my phone on airplane mode so that the notifications don't come up, so that I'm not tempted to look at the screen popping up. Another thing that I did was I made myself like little goals or like rewards. So like if I wanted to go and eat out, I would set like, okay, so I need to do this study guide and write this paper and then I can go do this. So kind of like
Hmm.
mini rewards for the things that I was doing and accomplishing in that, time frame. So that helped
Sure.
to motivate me. Um, because my
Sounds like
husband
the
who
classic. That sounds like the classic carrot and the stick, right? So, are you
yeah,
motivated by getting slapped on the back with the stick, or to avoid the negative things, or are you motivated by the carrot dangling in front of your face to get you to chase the things that would be good for you to engage in?
yeah. So and my husband was really he was on with it. I think he actually enjoyed it a little bit, because if I didn't do something, like if I didn't finish it all the way, but I was like, "Oh, I finished it enough," like and tried to like, "Well, we can still go." And he's like, "No, you didn't finish it." And I was like, so it kind of helped me to like, okay, I have to finish it because I have somebody holding me accountable. So also having like an
That's
accountability
beautiful.
partner, having
That
somebody there.
outside accountability is key because we'll let ourselves down all the time, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll do that a lot. Especially like I'm trying to lose weight right now, and oh well, I did good this week. I went to the gym like 3 times. I can go get Starbucks,
Right,
and it's like,
right.
but have you been eating healthy the rest of the days, not just going to the gym? So, it's kind of like that, and like yourself, like you yourself don't always want to follow your own rules that you set. You always want to like bend them.
Absolutely not.
So, uh, that was kind of the thing too. I had to make sure that I had somebody saying like, "No, you made these rules. Now you have to follow them." But yeah,
Sure.
that's how I did, and I always set like I always like setting the day that I would study instead of like dragging it out to. Most of my assignments were due on like Sunday or Monday, so just getting it done. Um, I would gather stuff throughout the week to do the assignment, but to do it on Sundays and set a day for it, it just made it so much easier. So, yeah.
Lily, that it sounds like you took the time necessary to what I call figure yourself out, right? Like you took the time that was necessary to figure out all of these little hacks, all of these little tips and tricks and things that were necessary for you to, experience the outcome that you were looking for, and you were willing to do them. So, kudos to you. Congrats to you for taking that time because I'm sure it wasn't easy, especially based on, like you said, the hand that you were dealt.
Yeah.
So, what are we doing from here, right? So, if Lily has, I don't want to say entirely overcome, but largely, right, gotten down the path of figuring yourself out and recognizing that you have this power, if you will, to accomplish things and overcome things. What do you do with it from here? What passion projects are you working on? What type of impact would you like to have?
So, right now I'm a support coordinator. So what I do is I work in conjunction with the state of Louisiana, and I work with families who have children who have disabilities and help
Mm-hmm.
them coordinate things, their different services, so that the parents don't have all that on themselves. So I
Sure.
kind of just take on, you know, do you need me to help you schedule a doctor's appointment? A lot of these parents are working jobs. They're busy. They're picking up their kids from school. They have, they have other kids to also
Is
handle.
this a government agency or is it a private company that you work for?
It's a nonprofit, and so we offer these services to the families, and it's paid through Medicaid. And so and
Got
it's
it.
it's really, helping them get all the services that they can, and I really like it because I can help these families in a different way, and I know the ABA side of the
Mm-hmm.
field, so when it comes to ABA I can give them more information where ABA is not really known outside of ABA. So a lot of people just know it's a therapy, but they don't know what they do. So I can give the parents kind of the information on, this is going to be the process of the intake. You need an evaluation, and kind of walk them through that. And but also helping them with different things like, are you still getting the services that you need? Do you like the services that you're getting? And different things like that. So that's
You feel like your upbringing gives you a particular advantage or a particular, particular perspective to be helpful to the people you work with?
Yeah. I actually had my supervisor ask me the other day, um, because I just started this job in October, and they've been asking me, it can be a lot. You have a lot of requirements to meet. And like I said, I've, gotten to where, I have my routine and I do it, my email is set up to where it's super organized, where everything has a folder and everything goes in a folder. My inbox is always empty so that I catch every email that comes in. And so I stay on top of my work, which they have just been impressed with, because I kind of went into this job not really, I had no experience in the support coordination side. I had experience in ABA. Um, so
Right.
for me to come in and not have like, barely any experience with that kind of stuff, it kind of impressed them that I'm able to keep up and stay ahead of the tasks that I'm given. Our job is very,
Sure.
you have to be very organized and it's very tedious. You have a lot of paperwork you have to fill out. You have a lot of paperwork you have to send off, whether it's to a doctor's office or the school board or different things like that. But you have to be the one that initiates that. You call the families, you
Sure.
talk to the families, you're the direct contact with the families. So I feel like that's also been, that also kind of brought to mind, where my discipline comes from studying. I kind of do my work
Sure.
just as I did my studying. I make a to-do list and I mark it all off. And if I don't get something done in that day, I put it on the next day. I don't just like, oh, I'm gonna remember that. I make sure I write it down because
Right.
I'm gonna forget it. But I mean, other than that, I do ASMR. I started doing ASMR on YouTube before TikTok came out, and I started it, and then it's kind of like you said the other day on TikTok, your inbox was filled with like women that are like, I'm interested. It started to become like
Right.
oh, you're cute, and it kind of just started to make me uncomfortable. And so I stopped. The Johnny Depp trial had gotten popular, and that's really where I picked
Hmm.
up on TikTok. I started sharing stuff from the trial and just different like memes and different funny things that I would create. So it kind of became a celebrity news channel, and that's where my TikTok picked up. But now I'm kind of transitioning back
Sure.
into ASMR because
So you're actually recording. You're recording ASMR. Or are you just saying you consume that content?
yeah, I'm recording it. I'm about to start recording it again. I had stopped for a little while with grad school and stuff. It kind of made it hard for me to set a schedule to record because I felt like, I really need to be studying, not focusing on recording a video at
Sure.
that moment. Um
What are
and,
the
and
what are the benefits of ASMR? What are the benefits of it to the people who listen to that or consume that? Can you talk with me through that?
So I actually found ASMR by accident. I had trouble sleeping and I had trouble getting to sleep. My husband would tell me, just close your eyes and go to sleep. I'm like, it's not that easy. My brain doesn't shut off. It just doesn't stop. Um, but with
Mm.
ASMR, they'll talk really soft. They'll whisper. They'll do different like sounds. And for some people, like in their brain, it kind of like gives them like a tingly sensation. Um, and it'll like relax you. And some people fall asleep. I started watching it and I found the benefit like I could fall asleep and it would help me relax where I wouldn't have to take a melatonin gummy before I went to bed. I could just watch a video
Okay.
and then go to sleep. It kind of like makes you it kind of would just make my brain just stop and I just wouldn't think about
Nice.
anything.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to know that because I've seen it a few different times and I've never really. It doesn't do anything for me personally, so that's why I was curious to know what the benefits were and why. Because I mean,
And
I've seen it
some
again. I've seen
people
it a few times, and it's not a small crowd, right? If I come across certain pages where, I mean, there's thousands of people listening to an ASMR creator, and I'm going, man, there's got to be something there for it to capture an audience as big as that. There's got to be some merit to it.
yeah, yeah, some people it really doesn't. Like my husband watched it one time and he was like, "This is weird." I'm like,
Hmm.
I mean, it's not if it works, but for some people it doesn't. For me, sometimes I'll even put it on while I'm studying just to have the background
Hmm.
noise, but it's not something that I need to
Sure,
focus on. But they have different
I could
ones
see
where
that.
it's just ASMR, but it's just talking, but they're talking really low.
Sure,
So they'll do like a podcast, but they're whispering really soft.
sure.
So I like that when I'm studying too. Um, and I'll put that on like if I'm writing notes or something, or while I'm at work, I'll put it on just to have some background noise because sometimes I get bored with music. So But yeah,
I can
that's
understand that for sure. Lily, I have a question. What do you feel like was the biggest factor? And I don't know if it was an internal thing for yourself or if it was the support system with mom and the therapist and everything else. But what do you think has allowed you to not have a victim mentality? Because I feel like today so many people sing this song of them being the victim of either, an unfair disadvantage or being, born into a situation that's impossible to overcome, or the government's out to get them, or rich people are out to get them, or this company's out to steal their money or take their money. Like, I feel like victim mentality is rampant today. You don't have that, right? And I know this is a wonderful success story, and yet you had every reason in the world to have a victim mentality, yet you didn't. Can you
now.
talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I actually did kind of, when it happened, you kind of just like, you kind of sit in it for a minute. Um and I mean,
Mm,
I was a kid, I was just kind of like, oh, my teacher's being mean. It was a private school. There's nothing wrong with private schools at all. They're great, but it was just like at that point I felt like I'm being pointed out because like I just felt like I was being pointed out because I didn't always make the best grades. So for a while it
sure.
was kind of like, oh, they're just targeting me. But then after a while, like when my mom pulled me out of that school and I started into a new school, it was kind of my mom because when like I was making great grades and doing great in school and I was happy, I had friends. She was just like, "Wow, I wish that teacher could see you now." And like she just
Hmm.
kept saying that, like, "Wow, I wish you could see your grades now. You were a C average student, but here you are making almost straight A's." So it was kind of my mom
Right.
where she like kind of like made sure that I didn't get into that rut because I think she could see like this could be really easy for you to get discouraged and a kid just give up. I mean, I could have taken it the other way and been like, I'm a C average student. Okay, I can make C's. I don't have to study as hard and, I don't have to do all this stuff. I mean, my mom helped me the best that she could. She gave me every opportunity that, I could ask for, whether it was bringing me back and forth to tutoring or to the different things that I had. And she always pushed me to, like, if I need help, go ask somebody. She always pushed me, like,
Yeah.
if,
Don't be
if
afraid to ask for sure.
yeah, and that's also what like kids that I've babysat and things like that. I'm like, they're like, I just don't get this. I'm like, then ask your teacher. Well, she doesn't want to answer my question. I'm like, yes, she does. That's why the teacher's there. The teachers are there to
Right.
help you. They're not just there to stand in the front and lecture you and then go sit down at their desk. They're there to help you. And so that's kind of what my mom taught me, if you have a question, ask. Don't be scared to ask the teacher, hey, can I come meet you after school for 15 minutes and you just explain this math problem to me? I had so much trouble
Yeah.
in math. I hated math. That's probably the only class that I made a C in, and I was like, I'm okay with it. I just wasn't great in math. But yeah, I could see where some people could get stuck into the victim, like, poor me, I was
Right.
targeted this way. But it's to think about it the other way and just, I can kind of back to what I said, like I can do this. But also like thinking, like turning it around, and saying like,
Sure.
I'm gonna show you and prove you wrong, and doing the exact opposite. And that's always pushed me with everything, not just academics. Like, my husband will use that in the gym. He'll purposely make me upset so that then I go and work harder at the gym.
There you
Um,
go.
there's been times where he's like made me mad, and then I go on the treadmill and I just like run, like, I mean, harder than I've ever run before. And he's like, "Wow, didn't know you had that in you." And I'm like, "Well, make me mad." you know. Um, and there's sometimes where like I'll catch myself, like he'll make me upset at the gym, and I'm just like, and then I don't want to do anything, and he's like, "I'm doing this to motivate you." go use that motivation. And that's kind of where I picked that up from, was like, make, kind of like push me. And that's what he was like, I push you to do your best. So he,
Sounds
my
like he loves
mom,
you
my
enough.
dad,
Sounds like he loves you enough to take the time necessary to figure you out, so that way he can get you to do the things that you want to do for yourself without
yeah,
without doing it
without
in a
doing
way
it
that
for me.
works.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, I thought about that the other day too. I was like, wow, you really use that to to my advantage, not yours, But
which
yeah,
is
so
beautiful,
I
right? Because I'm sure he wants the best for you, and sometimes getting out of your own way, right? So I'm sure a lot of times other people might have the right idea or the right thing to do, but they can't get themselves to do it. And so he apparently has figured out how to get that to happen for you.
yeah,
Now, Lily, before we wrap, I have a few just kind of last thought questions that I think are relevant, not only in your situation but also just kind of universally applicable. And one of them is, right, if you were to give guidance or advice to someone who is maybe struggling with owning their own story, meaning someone who's not willing or able to accept either their childhood or a certain hurdle that they've had to overcome or a certain traumatic experience that they've had. What advice might you give them to be able to overcome a particularly difficult situation?
I would say find a support system. I know that, I would talk to my mom about it, but I would also talk to my friends about it, and they also pushed me as well. So finding the support system and somebody that's going to be there, almost like a emotional support animal, you have somebody there to hold you up and to hold you accountable, but to also remind you like, hey, you started here and you made it this far. Like, or you started here and you're halfway there. You're a quarter of the way there. That's always, a good thing. And some people don't have that, but I mean, I'd say, just, I feel like in our age of TikTok and media and Facebook, and get us, like, if you're in school, get a study group. That's if what
Right.
I did in grad school. At the beginning of grad school, before we even started, I emailed everyone on our list, said I'm making a study group. If anybody wants to join, email me back and we'll make a group. So I mean, I feel like it's easy to find people that are going to support you. Not easy, but I feel like there's always people that are going to want to hear your story and support you. There's always going to be that person that's going to be your cheerleader on the sideline, um, cheering you on,
Sure.
just being that person. My mom was that person for me, but also having the discipline, and just finding what works for you. What I found was I looked on YouTube, organization tips, binder organization tips, study tips, and that's where I found study cards, different things like that. Um, but yeah,
Well, thank you for that for sure. And another question is, so who do you think might benefit from knowing, right? Like who's the person that would benefit from knowing that you have overcome what you've overcome, and who do you maybe hope to inspire with your story?
I feel like anybody that's in school that is just starting with college, or is thinking about it, like any high schoolers, but also like work. I mean, if you feel like, your job isn't, giving you enough praise or isn't recognizing you in a way, push yourself to be your best. And
Sure.
it's gonna eventually, it's gonna pay off. It may not look like it right now, but it will. Um, and like people starting school, you can do it if you put your mind to it. Um, and just find a support team. But yeah, I know there's a few people that will take breaks after high school and take a year gap. My advice would be not to do that, because um,
Right.
I feel like, and this is just me, but I feel like that gives you the excuse to not go, and then you become like, oh well, I'll just do it later, and it just keeps getting pushed back and pushed back. I started college 2 weeks after I graduated high school. um, I went on my senior trip a week later. I started college, so um, I had no break at all since now. Now I don't know what to do in my life.
Right.
All my life
Well, I
I've been
appreciate
studying.
that because I feel like any decision that's deferred, not only does it become more difficult, but it's also less likely that you're going to make, right, the good decision to make the difficult choice of going, right? Anything that's deferred or delayed, we have this, a bit of a laziness or a bit of a weakness that sets in, and the outcome of inaction or indecision is very rarely a positive one.
Yeah. And my thing too is like, don't be scared to tell your story. Um, for a while that was my thing, was I was scared, that people that I live around would see it, and judgmental, and like thinking like, what are people going to think? Don't think about that. Just tell your story, because you may help someone in the end. And that's what I did, because telling my adoption story, I actually helped some people that were having fertility issues. They were like, wow, we
Hmm.
just didn't think about adoption and the foster care system because we heard so many negative stories about it. And that's where I really was just like, wow, you're always going to help somebody, and somebody's always there to listen. Um, Whether you have a
Lily,
thousand
I
people in
really
your room or
appreciate,
five.
right. I really appreciate you saying that because that's that pretty well sums up the entirety of what I'm hoping to do here with this podcast, because there's a lot of people who might hear your story and just skate past it or gloss over it and think that it's not relevant or significant because it doesn't touch them. But then there's also a large group of people, and even if it doesn't actually reach a large group of people, even if it even just impacts one person, that it changes either their opinion of the foster care system from a negative one to a positive one, if it changes their perspective on what, what's possible for someone who might be born into a disadvantaged situation, and to overcome that, or someone who might have some type of, tunnel vision, and think that there's no answer or think that there's no way to get through it, but they're inspired based off of hearing your story to change the way that they look at it and act based off of those changes that they make, cognitively or mentally. So thank you again for your vulnerability, for your courage, and for just your willingness to show up for yourself and accept yourself and tell your story. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Well, Lily, if you would like to, I guess, hear from or have anyone in the listening audience reach out to you, how might they be able to find you on TikTok or YouTube or wherever you can be found? How can folks get in touch with you?
So they can find me at Lily Seymour ASMR on TikTok, or Lily Seymour ASMR on YouTube, and they can message me through there. My TikTok doesn't get much messages, so that's probably what I would see first, but that would be the way to contact me for now, unless anything else changes at that point.
Perfect. Is there any particular type of collaborator or any particular type of, I guess, person that you have an interest in connecting with? Are you looking to be introduced to a certain person, or do you have a certain individual who you would like to connect with for a certain reason? And I ask that because I would like to maybe let this be a platform that might facilitate that, and get you in touch with that. If maybe there was a public service announcement that, hey, Lily's trying to get in touch with, this type of person, please reach out. Who might that be?
I don't really have anybody um that I
Okay,
can
and
think
that's
of
no
right off the
worries.
top of my head.
No worries, not a problem. I just know that I personally just believe in connections and collaboration, and there's no such thing as a chance encounter that won't yield fruit, right?
Mhm.
If we experience life and if we approach new relationships through a healthy and constructive lens, right? Like we want to make ourselves available to others and serve one another in a healthy way, then there's no way that we come away from this conversation and you're not improved from it and I'm not improved from it. And so I just believe that about connection, and so I want to facilitate as many connections as possible with two people who might have synergy. So that's the reason why it might sound like a little bit of a strange question, but that's the reason why I believe in that.
Well, yeah,
Well, Lily, it's been a great. Go ahead.
oh yeah, I was just gonna say, that's like a great thing. Um, I feel like I just haven't. I feel like I just haven't thought about that. It's just a thing that I just haven't sat down and thought about.
Well, maybe this is a conversation that might stimulate some thought around it, right?
Absolutely.
With good intentions, there's almost no right drawback to a new interaction or a new relationship, right?
Right.
Well, I want to thank you again. And it was an absolute pleasure hearing your story. And I'm confident that our audience will benefit from some of the tips and things that you shared. And at a bare minimum, they will be inspired to know that you can overcome difficult challenges if you are able to spend enough time figuring yourself out and implementing the discipline and applying the different things that you figured out for yourself. Maybe they'll apply the uh, Palmadoro. How do you say that?
Pomodoro method.
Pomodoro method,
Mm.
or one of the other things that you've suggested. So again, thank you, Lily, and we're out.